Today is the Fred Korematsu Day of Civil Liberties and the Constitution. Fred Korematsu refused to follow Executive Order 9066, which ordered people of Japanese descent to incarceration camps. Over 120,000 people were forced into camps during World War II. Decades later, his conviction was overturned and he received the Presidential Medal of Freedom. We celebrate Fred Korematsu Day because he was a hero for civil liberties, and he stood up for the United States Constitution and core American values of fairness and justice. There are important lessons we can learn from this history. Korematsu had the courage to stand up against a government order that, based on his stated concerns about national security, targeted people based on who they were, uprooted them from their homes and communities, and forced them into terrible circumstances that our country apologized for many years after the fact. Our nation's military officials were responsible for removing people from their homes. Executive Order 9066 was 83 years ago, and now we face executive orders that threaten the same American values that Fred Korematsu stood up for. One White House official last week described the Immigration and Border Executive Order and plans as being about, quote, national security and protecting America from invasion. The president has indicated plans to use military officials to remove people from our communities. Does this sound familiar? In 1942, the loyalty of anyone who had Japanese ancestry was questioned by our government. Now in 2025, anyone who's an undocumented immigrant, regardless of any criminal background at all, or looks like they might be an immigrant, regardless of what papers they have or might not have on them just at that moment, are all fair game under this administration for being targeted and are all being called criminals, even though study after study after study shows that immigrants commit less crime. Since 2011, Immigration and Customs Enforcement had a sensitive locations policy that prohibited immigration raids at schools, places of worship, and hospitals. This policy had been in place in various iterations, including during the last Trump administration up until last week. What does this mean? It means that children in some of our communities, even if they are citizens, are not going to school for fear of what might happen to their parents. Schools are places for learning, not for stoking fear. Last week, our federal government also expanded the use of what is known as expedited removal. What does this mean? It means that our immigrant neighbors can be put on a fast track to be deported with no due process, no right to appear before a judge, even if their circumstances or the paperwork that they have might have given them a chance to stay. Other changes effectively deny people a real chance at asylum, meaning that people fleeing war, violence, or economic desperation in their home countries may be forced back to danger. The President of the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops issued a statement of pastoral concern. Quote, recognizing the inherent dignity of each person as a child of God, we stand in firm solidarity with our immigrant brothers and sisters who live and labor in these United States. From the founding of our nation, immigrants have been essential to this society's growth and prosperity. They come to our shores as strangers, drawn by the promises this land offers, and they become Americans. Together, we must speak out on behalf of the huddled masses yearning to breathe free, and ask our government to provide fair and humane treatment for our beloved immigrant brothers and sisters. Fred Korematsu's daughter, Karen, recently said, quote, what the government did was they went into people's homes, kidnapped people, and separated their families. Their families didn't even know where they were sent for years and years. They are threatening to do the same thing now. My father's legacy is about moral principles of right and wrong. He knew that the government was wrong, and he was right. It is 8 decades after Japanese-American internment began. And what have we learned? Thank you, Mr. President.